A sincere thanks to our guest today, Scott Cook. Come on up. So let's start with what Intuit is today. Just for those folks who may not be familiar with the full scope of the business, can you give a snapshot of what Intuit is today?
We try to change people's financial lives forever. So we do taxes, where our goal is to get you more money without having to do any work. We do the largest supplier of tax stuff to tax preparers. So if you go to a tax preparer, it's likely our stuff that you're doing. We help small businesses succeed. So try to find the biggest problems we can solve, whether it's keeping the books, paying the employees, getting more customers, getting organized, filings, government. We help businesses go mobile, so you're not tied to one place, so you can run your business and your life on your mobile phone. We do that in the U.S., primarily the English-speaking world, and we're working, moving outside the English-speaking world. We are the largest payroll service company in the country, so we pay employees for over 1 million companies. Payments processing, so you can get your payments processed, and so you can also pay each other. And we're less focused on retail, in other words, the point of purchase, and more focused on the largest volume of business-to-business payments, which are paying the invoices. So automating that whole stream of purchase orders, invoices, payments, so instead of paper or email, they can all be automatic. We help people manage their financial lives, particularly the routine stuff, whether it's figuring out where the money went, paying your bills, and a whole collection of stuff in the routine financial area. Ultimately, we're trying to help with some of the really big unsolved problems. And here's a big one. Among our QuickBooks customer base, of a few million customers, 60% have applied for a loan, business loan. 70% got turned down. In an ugly process that takes months of lots of back and forth with the bank and data, and eventually they got turned down. Some of those businesses go out of business because they couldn't get a loan. This is a problem we can solve. So we're working on solving that problem, among others. And we've got a test bed up, it's already working, and we're already getting letters coming in and emails from businesses who say, thanks to you, our business is here today, because you got us a loan when nobody else did. So that's the kind of stuff we work on, find the biggest problems we can solve.
It's fantastic. So let's just review for everybody the flagship products. You mentioned QuickBooks.
QuickBooks,
TurboTax,
Quicken, Mint, DocStock, of course.
Thank you. Nice plug, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And the company's $23 billion market cap.
Yeah, market cap, something in that zone, yeah.
It's pretty, something in that zone. It's a couple, give or take a couple $1 billion. And then 8,000 employees worldwide.
Yep.
And the company was started 35 years ago?
Almost, 1983.
All right. So let's go backwards and start at the beginning of the journey, because, and let me give you a sense of the audience here. How many of you in the room are currently running or planning to start your own company in the next couple months? So you can see we've got a room about half entrepreneurs here. Mm-hmm. How many of you are currently looking for funding for your business? Okay. Right. And then just to kind of give you a sense, too, of how many of these folks, talking about the community, how many of you been to over 5 of the events that we've done over the last couple years? All right, so this is our definition of active and engaged users. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you just share everyone a little bit, like what was the impetus, where were you at in life, and what was the impetus for originally starting Intuit?
My wife complained about doing the bills. She's very good at it.
Complaining or doing the bills?
No, doing the bills.
Okay. Just making sure.
No, she's very good at it, but it was a pain in the butt and a waste of time to spend time doing. Back then, you paid bills with paper checks and a check register and all that sort of stuff.
Now, what were you doing? What were you doing right before then? Had you been starting companies already?
I was working for Bain & Company, the consulting company, but I could tell my future wasn't to do that, and I'd always imagined starting a company. So I was playing with a couple ideas. I ran the first ever packaged windsurfing tour from the United States, and found that I really didn't like leading travel, and then started working on this idea. So it struck me that...
How old were you at the time?
Oh, well, let's see, 30... I started on the idea in 1982 when I was 30. So it struck me, I'd worked at P&G, and what P&G does is find some problem, big problem in people's lives that most people have, like diapering babies or deodorant or washing clothes, and that you can solve with technology. In their case, it's chemical or substrate technology, like in Pampers or Bounty. And that you can solve that problem better than anyone else and stay ahead with better technology. And it struck me, this sounded like a classic P&G problem. Here's a problem that I thought everybody would have. Everyone's got to pay bills to survive. And it makes sense that it would be a waste of time for most people. And computers, this was 1982, the IBM PC was just launched. And computers at the time could do almost nothing useful. I mean, a little crummy green screen, keyboard, almost no I/O, no internet, nothing. The only way things got in were your fingertips. But the one thing they could do, or the couple of things they could do, is data storage, data manipulation, and calculation, which is actually, and printing on a shitty printer. And that's all you needed to do financial automation. So it just struck me, here's a problem. The technology, the feeble as it was, could manage that. So that was the...
How did you originally capitalize the business? Were you wealthy before that? Had you made money?
No, it was great. They invented this thing called lines of credit just the year before, and they would send you these mailings saying, line of credit, you can sign up. So I'd sign up. And they didn't ask where the money was going, so that's...
Well, what was the original amount of capital it took to get Intuit off the ground?
Well, off the ground, we
hugged
the ground for a long time. In fact, we burrowed into the ground a few times. So, which definition of ground do you want? Yeah, if I had known then how hard it would be, I really wouldn't have done this.
Common theme. And so you and I had talked before. When did that first inflection point come up? You told me that story, right, about putting the first ad in the paper. I mean, when did you first feel like for that first Quicken product that you had built that this was actually going to start to work?
Well, I started working on 82. Tom and I got together in March of 83. And it was 87 before I could finally buy something that wasn't necessary to live. I bought a CD player. That was the first non-essential that I felt I could afford. So it took us, 4 years?
Yeah.
And it was, it was pretty rugged. We got turned down by every venture capitalist that we talked to. And I worked at 3000 Sand Hill Road. It's kind of the world center of venture capital. They all turned me down. Even my roommate from business school.
And how come? Was it that they felt like the metrics in the business weren't there? Why were you getting turned down?
Yeah, this was pre-launch, so we didn't have revenue metrics then. It makes sense when you view it from their standpoint. At that point, so in 1984, venture capitalists had really only funded industrial products. They had never funded consumer products. And technology was bought by corporations, whether it was chips or PCs were primarily bought by corporations. Home use was some weird thing. So they never thought that PCs would be used in homes. And we built on the IBM PC, the most expensive one, and they really never thought the IBM PC would be used in homes. If it was ever to get in homes, they never thought people would do their checkbooks on it. That was one of the stupid uses of a computer. And if you used our competitors, it was. And even if, by some weird coincidence, people started to do their checkbook on a computer, they weren't going to use our stuff because there were 25 other companies out ahead of us who had products with major marketing budgets that were selling, and our product had less than half the features of any of those. And even if by miracle they might, they didn't want to back us because none of us had any experience doing, I was a former fat and oil salesman from P&G, and my co-founder was still a student at Stanford. And back then, there was no track record for students creating companies. That's changed now. Plus, we had the software mostly built when we went out to get venture capital, and we wanted to use the money for advertising, and the venture capitalists didn't understand advertising. So in reality, the business was unfundable at the time in that era. And probably, if you're a VC, you shouldn't invest in things you don't understand. And this would have been investing in a consumer product with the use of money they didn't understand. So, yeah, we that was rough.
One of the things that's really curious to me is, all right, so you had this period, you were a 25-year overnight success, right? And today you have folks in their young 20s that sell companies and take them public for billions of dollars. What is it like when you're 30 to 35 and you're literally just trying to make ends meet? And then on the other end of the spectrum, you're a billionaire. You're genuinely one of the most unassuming people I've met from any walk of life. How do you reconcile that in your mind? What's it like to have those two ends of the spectrum?
I don't know. You spend your days working on stuff that matters, and I don't know, somehow the bank account you don't look at. And most of it's in stock, which doesn't sit in the bank account anyway, and goes up and down in value. I know we spent a long time when we were going public trying to teach people that we are not our stock price. What we do that matters is how we change people's lives. And if we do that well, if we solve their biggest problems, and we delight them, they'll tell their friends, and we'll get a lot more customers, and things will work out. But, so that's what we started the company to do. So find this problem that nobody had solved and figure out how to solve it. So I don't know, and that's what excites me.
Was there ever a point along the way as the company started having more and more success that you felt, wow, people were actually now starting to treat me differently because of the success the company's having? One of the things I wonder is that, we all try to be so successful, and at some point you get a little caught up in it. You just seem to do such a good job of not getting caught up in it. There are a lot of people that want to just be associated with you because of all the success you have. How do you?
I got an email today from an accountant who's a customer of ours, and he was pissed. He was pissed. He said there was some glitch in his software, and he couldn't get anybody on support, and he's looking at, this is an annual subscription product that they subscribe, and he's looking at that saying this makes no sense. And so I immediately was on saying, we'll get you help. Of all things, I know our people care deeply, and somehow until we've served every customer like that perfectly, so we don't have those, I don't think I've succeeded yet. We've got major businesses where there's key things we have to do that we just haven't done yet.
Yeah. Someone should probably take a note that we're understaffed in CS if you're still manning the Zen desk for us. But
customers find that's our point of need. Anyway, we're not solving when they need us most. We gotta fix that. So fortunately, we have people jump right on it. They've got the expertise to solve this issue. I don't, but.
Let's talk about the product process a little bit. How many folks here are currently working on a version of product that you want to get your first version of a product out? All right, so we've got a lot of people in just this room here that are working to launch a product. You've been through this process so many dozens or hundreds of times. What's your methodology and philosophy of how you build product from the ground up? Because it seems like of everything happening at Intuit, that's what you're most excited about, all the new things that are being built, not how to make QuickBooks $2 billion in revenue to $3 billion in revenue.
My mother won't understand $2 or $3 billion in revenue. I can't explain that to her. But I can explain the other stuff with a story of what we do. So starting, you're trying to get your first product out. I think the thing that saved our bacon back when we were starting and when no one was paying attention, we had competitors who were at the time you bought software in stores, if you can believe that. And when the competitors were in the stores and we were not, the thing that saved us was word of mouth. A delighted, somebody so happy, they told their friend, and they told their friend. Whatever you're doing in your product, particularly your first one, it's simple. For all of you who use Facebook, how did you first begin using Facebook? What caused you to use it? Was it advertising from Facebook? Was it a friend talking to you about Facebook? Raise your hand. Think of for Wikipedia. Was it advertising from Wikipedia? Was it word of mouth from somebody on Wikipedia? Raise your hand if it was.
Beer is another good example.
Which one?
Beer.
Beer. I mean, they run ads. Beer may be different. I'm not sure I know the how you sell image products. Beer, wine, cigarettes, fashion, liquor, perfume. There may be a different alchemy there. But the one thing to do is to figure out what you're going to do to change that customer's life so much, they're going to go out and tell 10 friends. It doesn't have to be, but often it's find their biggest pain point. Find the area you're working in. What's the thing they hate? What's the thing that is the problem they wish were solved, or they're not even aware because they're so numb to the pain. But if that pain went away, they'd be delighted. And then work relentlessly on that one thing. And pick the one you can really solve. We have a kind of a 3-circle Venn diagram. Find the biggest unsolved problem the customer has that we or we plus others can solve, and where we can build durable advantage. And look for the business in that intersection. That's where the great businesses tend to be.
And how do you know? So, there's, I think, were you the one that invented this follow me home process? It sounds a lot creepier than it is. They hit into it, they're like, we're going to do customer surveys by following them home. So can you talk about what this follow me home process is in a non-stalkerish point of view?
It's, we did surveys and stuff, and we were finding this is after we built Quicken, when it was deployed, people were using it, we found that the kind of setup process and all that, we were getting tech support calls that sounded like people were having trouble with that. But it wasn't coming up in the surveys. Surveys were suggesting everything was fine. But we were getting these tech support calls. It just seemed like people weren't getting it, or having downstream problems from upstream setup. Back then, it took more setup than things do today. You can go to Mint now, and Mint sets itself up automatically for you. But we didn't have that back then. There wasn't an internet connection. So I decided, well, let's go watch some people. Actually, the idea came from reading a Wall Street Journal article about Nissan. Nissan was trying to understand how Americans use cars, because Americans use cars very differently than they do in Japan. I lived in a Japanese household for a week, and the car was this trophy they brought out on weekends. During the week, they commuted on bikes and trains. So it's just a very different. And so Nissan wanted to understand how Americans do this, so they had some Nissan employees come as students to live in American households and take notes and watch. I thought, wow, they were really learning. I can understand now. The reason the article was in there is because they were getting sued by one of the households who claimed these were spies, only in America. So I thought, I'll take that idea. So we got software was sold in stores back then. So we got one of those stores to give out a little flyer with everyone who bought Quicken saying, we'd like to follow you home. Don't take the shrink off the box, call us first, and we'll arrange to have somebody there to watch. So we could be there at the moment they started. And it was amazing what you learned. Stuff they would never mention in a survey. There were a bunch of problems in the setup process. People just didn't grok what we thought was intuitive. And we learned by observing. And that's become, if you want to understand where's the customer pain, try to find it, go watch them. Don't talk to them, watch them. Watch them do whatever the thing is that you're curious about. And then look at their body language, look at their emotion that comes through. And once you're done watching, and you could be there for hours watching, then talk to them. Take them out for a beer and talk to them about what you saw. But for a bunch of reasons, I've learned trust behaviors, don't trust opinions.
It's really interesting. Trust behaviors, don't trust opinions. What are some non-Intuit products that absolutely delight you today, that you just love and solve a big pain point for you?
Let's see, what was here's one. This was somebody once said, proof that humans are not very bright is it took us 4,000 years to put wheels on luggage. So I got a piece of rolling luggage and I travel a bunch. This is the third of 4 cities I'll be in this week. And It's just magnificent how to roll that weight instead of carrying that weight. It's the simplest thing. Nothing moves except the wheels go around. And the way they made it, it was a pilot, an airline pilot, who invented modern rolling luggage. There was shitty stuff before, and you'd pull it and fall over. You may have seen that in some airports 10, 20 years ago. This pilot said, I'm carrying luggage every day. And he figured out how to a simple design of how to get it so it was stable as you rolled it. And even if you were going fast, as pilots do through airports. And started a company, Travel Pro, and that was the company that started rolling the modern rolling luggage. The seats on my Mercedes. Adaptive cruise control. Adaptive cruise control. Who has adaptive cruise control? Who drives on a freeway here? Anyone raise? This is so great. The radar goes out the front, and it keeps you the right distance from the car in front. And the modern stuff in stop-and-go traffic down to zero. It's really miraculous. The seats on my Mercedes. So I'm skinny, and on leather seats, you slide around. These things inflate on each side.
I don't have that problem as much as you do. I more just tend to stay in one place once I sit.
Different strokes, and you've got this little adjuster, and it goes zoop, and the seats come up on the side, and then as you go around to turn this way and your body's thrown this way, it inflates a little, keeps you up. It's really elegant. So those are some.
Any kind of consumer web products that you find yourself using a lot these days?
The ability to have your life in your pocket. God, this is so, and when we get good at this, when we finally do what we should be doing at the company, you'll never have to think about bills again. You know who pays bills the moment they arrive? There's always a couple people. Always a couple. I'm glad you're organized. Who doesn't pay bills the day they arrive? Right there, okay. So then you got to remember. And there are some stacks somewhere, and if you forget, and some people do auto payment, they set it up at the bank and automatically pay, but most Americans can't do that. They don't have enough money in their checking account. So when we get this right, your phone will go, you'll get a message, you'll say, you have this bill due tomorrow, here's your bank account, how much do you want to pay? And you'll go, just pay it, and you're done. That's the way it should be. And it's so miraculous having this stuff in your pocket. Google Maps, I think, is just a tremendous thing, for example, to never get lost because you have it in your pocket.
So if you haven't been running Intuit for a while now, obviously you're very active as the chairman. If you could run any other company besides Intuit, what company would it be and why?
At the moment, I dislike enterprise software, the whole process of salespeople selling to people who won't become the users, buying bad interfaces, torture people. Expensive contracts, the whole notion. I love the consumerization of this stuff. But there's a company in Madison, Wisconsin called Epic. And they sell the system that is the back-end business system, data system for more large hospitals in the U.S. than any other. And what they have, which they've not yet done anything with, is the data. They've got the health records data on more people and could put that in a compatible format. And if I were God, I'd enable that data to be unified and open sourced so that medical researchers could now have the largest database of data in the world to do analytics on. And I think we'll get some breakthrough advances. Hopefully people will do this with the National Health Service in the UK. We can get large and unified data. Because I think there are medical breakthroughs that'll come when we can attack the big data that's already locked up in hospital vaults, when we can attack that with modern analytics.
So let's talk about the ramp up from Intuit, because I think it's interesting to kind of break down the timeline. How many years was it before Intuit became a public company?
10 years after we got started, so 1993.
And roughly, what was the revenue ramp in those 10 years?
Well, for the first 3, it's kind of 0, 0, 0. Rounds to 0.
And literally, how were you making ends meet? How much total capital had you raised to work for those 3 years?
Well, we went through lots of sources.
Didn't your parents give you a loan?
Yeah. I borrowed money from my parents. I used my profit sharing and retirement from Bain. I used my savings. these lines of credit.
So you really went all in. I mean, you took all your savings, you went into debt.
Yeah, borrowed from my dad's savings, his retirement fund. Then we went out to get venture capital. We were looking for $2 million. That didn't work. So one of the guys in the office said, well, this isn't working. Let's go talk to some rich people. I said, well, that's good, but I don't know any rich people. And he said, well, I know two. So we talked.
Two.
And from the two of them, we got $151,000 total. So that we lived on for a while. And then we burned through that. And then things were looking, we went back to those two guys and they wouldn't invest anymore.
And with that, those 3 years where were you not making revenue or were you not making profit?
Revenue would have been nice.
And so was it all just product development?
No, we were trying to sell stuff.
So what wasn't working in that time? What was happening for 3 years that people weren't buying what you had?
Let's do it in 3 chapters. So chapter 1 is, at the time, all software was sold in stores, so you had to get into the stores. And I can remember visiting, so I went out in advance, while we were building the product, I went out to understand how software stores work. So I visited software dealers in various cities, including, I remember one here in LA. And I was back in his office and telling him, well, how do you choose software? How do you make the decision? What should a company do? Blah. And he said, I don't choose software anymore. I turned around and said, you see that big bin by the front door that's got all the discount software in it, 90% off? That's the stuff I bought. I don't buy software. I wait until 5 people come in and ask for it. Then I consider stocking it. So you got to get people to come in and ask. Well, we didn't have the money to do that, so we couldn't get in distribution. You had to get a distributor, and then you had to get stores, and so we had no distributor, so we kind of were locked out of the stores. So I could see this coming. So from the work I did trying to get into stores, and so I'd been a consultant to banks, and I went and talked and told one of the CEOs of the bank what I was up to, and he said, why don't you talk to us? We already talked to all the customers you'd like to have. So in desperation, I kind of went and talked to his people, and they said, well, we'll market it for you. This will give us a kind of a high-tech look, and we won't have to spend R&D money. And so they bought 1,000 units and then set about spending their marketing. We had no marketing money, so they spent their marketing money. So that looked good. They introduced us to other banks, and we started selling banks, and eventually it was able to sell enough banks. But then a funny thing happened. It turns out if you're a bank and you have valuable property, where do you put it in the bank? In the vault. Where do consumers not shop? In the vault. So they were horrible at selling it, absolutely terrible. They sold virtually nothing. So at this point, after selling 10 banks and then seeing the track record just wasn't there, ethically, I couldn't go to the next bank saying, oh, this is going to work great, because I now had clear proof that it wasn't.
Damn ethics.
Yeah, so there goes our revenue channel. So at this point, we'd run out of money. We'd stopped paying salaries.
Whoa. And how many people did you have at that time?
Before or after stopping paying salaries? We had 7. It shrunk to 4. We had one. One was Tom, my co-founder, who was our CTO. His eventual sister-in-law, so the sister of his girlfriend. She had just left her job at a radio station and joined us. And a week later, I announced to the company, we're out of money. We'll pay for the time you worked, but we don't have any money going forward. This is not a layoff. I'd dearly love you to stay, but I know some of you might have to get jobs that actually pay. She went and got on the phone that night and called her dad in Chicago and said, oh, no, I just left my job and joined these people. What am I going to do? And he said, you should stay. You gave him your word you were going to work for him. You should stay. I only found this out years later. And I'm thinking, when I heard this story years later, I said, well, we gave her our word we'd pay her. We're kind of welching on that one. But 4 of us stayed. And we gave back the rented computer, the rented furniture. We brought in card tables from home. We used cases of unsold product as printer stands. And we had lots of unsold product, so we had lots of printer stands.
So you're a couple years in. Do you have any kids at this point? You're married, right?
No
All right.
kids.
So no kids, but you're married.
Yeah.
What was your motivation to keep going? I mean, a lot of people give up at that point or say, hey, maybe I've got to go back and get a job. What was it that was driving you to keep pushing forward?
I think being a small business person, something that I felt and now I've learned in working with small business people, your self-image is your business. It's what you are to your in-laws. It's what you are to your classmates. It becomes so tied up with your self-definition. Plus, I have to admit, it was fear because we'd run up so much debt. So the $151,000, all the money from it was about $365,000, I think, and I felt honor bound to pay it back. So if we closed the business, I'd have to pay off through honest work $365,000 when salaries were a lot lower than you guys get, and that would take a decade or more of no vacation, no nothing, just to pay back my parents and the investors. Now the investors invested in equity. I just still felt I needed to pay them back. And so the fear of shutting it off really kept me going to try to find some way that the business could work enough to pay off the debts. Plus, we always believed, I never shared that part with the other guys, but
How did you personally handle it? I mean, do you feel like you had the right temperament to handle those challenges in stride, or I mean, how stressful? How stressful of a time was it in life for you?
It was particularly stressful at home. My wife's a planner, and there was no plan. I mean, all plans had all failed, and so she had a very good job and kept working, and that's what kept our household afloat. But she was not a happy camper, and so it was rough. That was the roughest part, actually.
So should we go to the second chapter now?
So we really struggled in the middle of the bank period. Fortunately, toward the end of the bank period is when I signed up the banks. So we almost went under before I could get 8 more banks. And that's when we worked without salary. Eventually, we got enough banks that they paid. And one good thing about banks is they pay. They got cash. So we could collect from the banks, but that's when we discovered it just didn't work. The banks couldn't sell the stuff. So Tom and I sat there and I said, Tom, we're either going to get big or get out. We had gotten enough money from the banks to start paying down the debts, and we could start paying salaries again. But that wasn't going to last because, they were unsuccessful. So that was kind of spending capital we had gotten a one shot at. So what we decided to do was to try to go direct. Fortunately, I'd gotten a software distributor by this point. There was a chain that had picked us up, but still the volumes were trivial. So I didn't know at the time, but we were starting to get word of mouth because some people did buy from the bank, and they started telling their friends. But what we did is we put all the money we'd saved into running direct response ads. And I got a classmate of mine to teach me how to do a direct response ad. We tried getting an ad agency to write one, total failure. So he taught me how to write one, and I'm not a writer.
What did he teach you?
You got to convince and close the sale in the ad. This isn't image advertising. They're not going to go to the dealer or the store and find the product. They have to demand it. So close the sale in the ad. Dramatize it. Walk them through the process. Tell a long text. Visualize it. Put a coupon on an 800 number. Track everything. And pull out the best ad you can find from somebody who's doing it the way you want and copy how they do it. So that's what I did. Then I would mail him my handwritten copy, and he would mark it up. I'd go rewrite it, mail it to him, and then we ran that, and by God, it actually worked. It's one of the few times that you could measure the payback, and it was paying back more contribution than it cost us to run the ad. So then we ran lots of ads. But even as we went back that year to track where did our sales come from, and we spent like a banshee on advertising because the ads were working, most of the customers came from word of mouth, from other customers. So what really worked for us was all the work we'd done, building the product, the work we did to understand the customer problem, the work we did with usability testing. We didn't call it that at the time, but as far as I know, we were the first people to bring in. We actually brought in housewives from the junior league because women didn't work as much then. We could get them for free, and we didn't have money. And we'd have them use the software, and where they got in trouble, we'd ask them what's going on, and we'd go back and re-engineer and redesign. And that cycle, that iteration, actually produced something that solved problems for... Anyway, it's the word of mouth. Then Then what happened is the business took off, tripled every year,
Tripled every year. So can you talk about the revenue ramp for a couple of, so first 2 years, we're not making any money. Then years, 4 through 10, what did that revenue ramp look like?
It was about 4 through 8, and it was used 4 through 8. It was tripling every year. Like 100,000, 300,000. I mean, these numbers started small. $1 million, $3 million, $9 million.
And then how much was the company doing in revenue when you went public?
So that was the spring of '93. I don't remember exactly.
Roughly.
30.
And so what was talk about
30,
your,
40.
and you're running the company the whole time, so you took the company public as CEO. And how many employees did you have at the time that you took the company public?
About 500.
Can you talk about, because you talk a lot about culture now, and did you think and focus much on culture, and what was your management style as you went from 4 employees that you didn't pay to 500 employees at a company going public?
Didn't pay them for 6 months. The rest of the time.
I'm sure they ended up just fine.
When you're tripling, life is a sprint. People would ask, isn't it a problem scaling? I said, no, this is the problem you want. Life's a sprint when you're tripling, and it's a good sprint. I mean, amazing thing after amazing thing would happen.
Were there any big mistakes that were made along the way, or for the most part?
Yeah, every year. So many. How many hours you got? Where do you want to start?
Well, why don't we focus, we'll come back later to the mistakes. Can you talk about your management philosophy? I mean, what kind of leader were you? Because you were now running a big company with a lot of people for the first time. What was your style? If I year 8 went to go ask people, hey, how's Scott Cook as a leader, what would they tell me?
That's a good question to ask, by the way.
Thanks.
That's a good question for anyone to ask, and in fact for leaders to ask. What will your people say about you, the leader?
I think you told me that question. I just regurgitated it in all fairness.
When do I like the
last
question?
time, so I'm giving you the credit for it.
One thing I've learned is that companies grow up in the image of their founder and CEO. With kids, you can blame DNA and this weird stuff that Gregor Mendel figured out. But companies, it's not DNA. You hired everyone there. You trained everyone there. You told them what to do. You gave them the objectives. You evaluate them. You decide who to promote and who departs. Companies grow up in the image of not what you say, but what you do. For better or for worse. It was very important to me that if we were to win, that we win by doing it the right way, so that everyone learned how to do it the right way.
What does doing it the right way mean?
It's like when we first had our first bonus to give out. I passed out the checks, and I told everybody, look at those checks. The check comes from Intuit, but the money comes from the customer. And we only win if we delight customers so much they're willing to part with their money and tell 10 friends. So what does that mean? That means you really test what you're doing before you bring it out so you know it's good. And you test with small groups of customers. A lot of our competitors had never bothered to test. They didn't know that most of their buyers gave up on their software product. Then you intentionally go in and fix everything that you can find that's wrong. You stay steadfastly focused on what's the biggest change you can make to that person's life. What's going to change, revolutionize their life. You speak honestly. You tell the truth.
What would you self-identify as your biggest strength as a CEO or as a leader in general? What is, I mean, there must be something that you just do, something or some things that you do so outsized well relative to other people that help, build the company to what it was. What is that? It's a long list of things, I'm sure. I know. Just go through them all and then pick the top one.
I had so after 11 years, I decided that I was holding the company back, and I wanted to recruit a CEO who had the skills I don't have. Because I thought my weaknesses were holding the company, were being a problem, increasing problem. So today our CEO is a guy named Brad Smith, who's an awesome, outstanding leader, inspiring to work with. And I just was, he and I were talking today, and I told him I've decided to, I'm the one guy in the company who gets to pick what I do. He doesn't, because he's got shareholders and customers and employees. He's got the hard job. But I can choose. So I told him I'm going to rebalance what I do somewhat substantially to work more with product teams, to do product team meetings. Because it's where I think I do the best work. It's where I have the most fun and where I think I do the most for the companies, to work with the teams who are actually crafting the customer experiences.
And what is it that you're so good about in the product and really, no humility yet. What is it that you're exceptionally good about in the product process that helps grow into it?
That would be a good question. Ask the audience, not the actor, on how good the show was. So you'll hear, ask others, and they'll tell you more truth than I know, because I'm too close to it. But I think what I try to, I'll tell you what I try to do. What I try to do is understand that when I'm sitting with a product team, when I sit down with them, the thing I focus on is where, and I asked overtly, where can I be most helpful to you in this meeting? And usually it'll be like a product manager will speak up. And then I kind of, well, what are the other opinions? So how can I, and I want to make sure I'm getting the engineers and designers' view of what are you least confident about? Where is there a dilemma or a choice or a challenge or a decision you're trying to make that you're not as confident about? I try to get to everyone on the team to find out what's on their mind. So I can root what I do in that meeting around what they see as most important, most undecided. It also, if I find I don't agree that that's the biggest thing, it lets me know where their minds is, because then if I've got to move their point of view, I've got to move it from here, knowing where it is, to maybe another place. But then what I do is try to really help them on whatever that biggest issue is. And so I leave them more excited about what they're doing than when they enter the meeting. Even if I have to help them change what they decided. What's clear is that nothing good happens with a product team unless they're excited. No matter how right I was, if they leave not excited, and even more so, they'll just cycle and spin.
It's really interesting.
So I think that's, and then as I do it, my goal is not to actually, my second goal is to make the product great. Whatever their big challenge is, whether it's understanding the customer test data they just got that didn't confirm their hypothesis, or if they've gone broad with lots of ideas and they're trying now to narrow, which is hard for some teams to do. Whatever it is, that's my second goal. My first goal is to build their capability so they are more capable to tackle that same issue next time. And if I can do the second goal, which is make the product great, well, achieving the first goal of helping the team grow in their capabilities to be awesome entrepreneurs, then when that happens, I've succeeded.
So let me ask the question in the reverse. What was it at year 11 that you felt that you were weak at or not good at, such that you felt somebody else in the CEO role could help keep growing the company even more than you?
There were a bunch of things. The corralling disparate opinions on the team and to try to synthesize and create and bring, the essence of leadership is followership. Trying to get people to align was hard. Speedy decision-making was hard. As the organization grew, there were strong opinions on stuff, which I love strong opinions, and I would stoke the strong opinions, but I wasn't as good getting them to converge. And organizations got to converge. You got to align on something. At least 90% of your people. You have 10% off doing something else, but you got to converge. There's a bunch of kind of infrastructure, architectural things of getting teams to work together, using time efficiency, running. It's just a lot of the people stuff I was not as natural at. And I now understand a root cause a lot better. something I should have done. And for any of you who are, actually for anyone, the thing that I did starting 7 years ago, that I wish I'd done starting 31 years ago, is I should have gotten a coach. You know, look at the finest athletes. I don't know if it's Tiger Woods or whoever. They all have coaches. Some coach will tell them the truth. Some coach who will help them do the tough habit changes. We're all creatures of habit. We do stuff the same way we did it yesterday. Particularly on the stuff that's hardest or most foreign or least natural, you need a coach. And I didn't do that. And I should have. About 7 years ago, I saw that we had found an executive coach we used for some of our executives. And he'd do a 360, and I got to participate in some of the 360. And I saw this guy. I said, this guy's good. And I said, you know, I'm the only guy here who doesn't get a performance review. I'd benefit from that. So I added myself to his bailiwick. And he first did a 360, and oh boy, did I have deferred maintenance. Ay, ay, ay. All this stuff that I wasn't seeing, that I couldn't see, the negative impacts I was having on people.
What was an example of one or two?
The one we talked about, I'd be so concerned about trying to get to the right answer in meeting with a product team that often, teams would leave dejected.
I think I've been guilty of that many times.
I think strong-willed people get into that. Teams would leave dejected. That whatever problem they had to solve didn't get solved. And I was working on something else that was my opinion, trying to get them to do, and I hadn't brought them. I had left some wake of destruction in disheartened product teams. And it was, and fortunately, he told the truth. It was all anonymous. All the people who shared with him, he didn't reveal sources. And he helped me see what I couldn't see. And then the hard part, he helped you work on how do you change your habits? How do you do stuff to convert from that being something awful to something? So that's the one learning I had. And that's why I hadn't solved those issues, is I didn't have a coach helping me. But anyway, that's my lesson.
So I'd love to stay focused on that topic for a second, because you have folks in this room that are wanting to be an entrepreneur. You have folks that are in the beginning of the process. You have other folks that have already been successful many times before and are running public companies like Sean Colo, you know, from Demand Media in the back. Can you talk about some more things that you wish you knew, right? If you could rewind the clock to year one of the business, to 10 years ago as chairman of the board, if you had to pick out one or two more things that you just wish you knew then, what you know now, and it would make such a big difference, what would some of those be as, you know, direct advice for everybody here?
Well, and just as I needed a coach, so does everyone working in the company. And that's one of the best gifts that a leader can do, is to be the coach for your team. And that means constant feedback. Now think, one thing I observed when I took my oldest to Little League practice is, I don't know sports, and I was terrible as an athlete, so I just watched. But I noticed, when you get to take kids to sports and watch the coaching from adults, parents, coaches, to the kids, I looked at the amount of coaching they were doing. Every practice, one-on-one coaching. Okay, here, try it and do it this way. Try it this other way. Nope, that wasn't. Try it. Look, think about it this way. One-on-one coaching, every practice, every day, to every athlete. And I compared to what we do in our company. Well, that didn't happen. You know, maybe somebody would get feedback. Well, let me ask, for those of you who've worked in companies, what's the average time between constructive feedback from your boss? Okay? For how many people was it a daily? Okay, 1, 2. For how many people was it weekly? Every week. So we've got a total of maybe 4 hands have gone up so far. For how many people was it monthly? You'd get it every month, once a month. Raise the hands tall so everyone can see. So that we might have hit 5% of the audience. Let's go to the other end. For how many people never got constructive feedback from their boss? Raise your hand. Okay, so that's a handful.
That's messed up, Doc Stalkers. Put your hands down.
Yeah. For how many people was it maybe no more frequent than every 6 months? Raise your hand. Okay, that's the mode so far. It's stunning how, particularly negative, the feedback on what you need to improve. It's easy to give celebratory, oh, that was good, that was good. But really constructive feedback. Here's what I saw you do. let's talk about what you rejected. Did that achieve the objective? How would you self-critique? Well, have you thought about this? This is really something I think you should try. And do that regularly. It's soon, right after.
Do you have a process of how you give constructive feedback so that it's easier for folks to hear and accept?
I'll answer yes, but I find if you just sit there immediately afterwards and talk to them, they'll accept it in almost any way. Don't be emotional. Just say, here's what I observed, and do it right immediately. People wanted small bites right away. If you were learning to shoot hoops, and you only found out 6 months later whether the shot went in, how good were you going to get? So the immediacy and regularity is what matters. Do it, especially the stuff that they need to hear but aren't hearing. Repetition, constancy. That's what people will say. They want to know what you hear. They really want the honest truth. And if they don't want the honest truth, you'll find that out, and then they'll move to another company. In my book, you got to be a learner. I was with A.G. Lafley, CEO of Procter & Gamble, yesterday, and I'm on their board. He told me, and it was going down, his criteria for top leaders, and he said, number 3, you got to be a learner. If you stop learning, you have no role in this company. So these are for senior execs, top execs. So people want to learn good ones. So how do I do it? What's the easy thing is ask for self-critique. So how do you think that went? What was the outcome that we were aiming for? How well did we achieve that outcome? Simplest thing. What'd you like? What'd you wish for? What'd you like? What'd you wish for? And in that wish for, often they'll bring up the thing they wish for, the thing they weren't happy with. And then you can help them figure, okay, now why did that not go as well? Let's talk about that. What's the root cause? And they'll talk about that, and you can help, well, how about this root cause? Oh, yeah. Have you tried doing it this way? Or here's a countermeasure. Try this as a... So the easiest way is to ask them to self-assess. So I was just in Israel, took the family, and went with another family. And we spent time with a number of Air Force, Israeli Air Force. Retired generals and some others. We just delightfully acquired a company that was rooted in Israel, and the CEO is ex-Air Force. And the Israeli Air Force dominates the sky over there. There's not even a challenge anywhere in the region. They just have crushed every opponent. And you ask them why. And then a bunch of Israeli Air Force people have gone into business and done spectacularly well. You ask them why, and they'll say a couple of things, but one thing they say is we have this culture of self-critique. After every mission, we'll do a training mission a day, and after that training mission, we get in a circle. Everyone has to come up with the 3 things they could have done better in that mission. Everyone, including the general. They all come up with their list of 3, and they tell their list of 3 things that I could have done better. And they also say, if your list is not the real list, we're Israeli, we're in your face, we'll tell you, no, I don't think you got it. So it's this culture of constant self-critique. If you build that into your regular rhythm, it's not surprising they became the best. Arguably in their kind of combat, air combat, the best in the world.
I've got some familiar with Israelis that like to critique. One of them has a special place in my heart. Let's talk about the future Intuit. 10 years from today, how do you see Intuit continuing to address the innovator's dilemma? I mean, right, it's really interesting. We're this company that has traditionally sold these 2 branded namesake products through traditional retail. Now we sell them through online, which means you have anybody and everybody as a competitor and lots of money flowing around. And we're looking to go in all these other spaces. What if the company is wildly successful at achieving its goals? What does it look like in 10 years, and how is that different from today?
Yeah, one piece will be similar, but on steroids compared to today. When we do our best work, we're a network of internal startups, a network of small startup teams who have their mission, and they're racing down the course to get that done. And they got their customer, and they've got their passion, they've got how they are trying to change the world. Either change the world for another internal team by building a service, or change the world for the outside customer. So that means it's like a hydra. You're able to attack multiple targets at the same time because you've got these multiple independent teams sprinting down where we're providing the electricity, the power, the momentum. But it's up to the teams to invent the big things. So what will be the kinds of things that will be invented? Let's start with the oldest stuff, the stuff we've been working on the longest. So most of the people's taxes today, more people use TurboTax than anything else. They use it on a website, and they sit there and, how many people use TurboTax? Raise your hand. Do you use TurboTax? Right now, the process is you sit there and you've got, maybe it's a half hour, maybe it's 2 hours, maybe it's 4 hours, you're typing information in a computer. That will all be gone. That team's goal is to make taxes and tax prep obsolete, so that we already have all the data that the government needs. We're collecting it for you all year long automatically. And when we have calculated your refund, we go, bing, your refund's going to be this much. Click here if you want to see it. Otherwise, the money will be in your account tomorrow. That's what we're working on. Oh, and not just your tax refund. We're now finding ways to bring you more money than your tax refund. So more than the money, because your tax refund is your money. We want to get you your money and other people's money, like the government's money. So we've got work to figure out. And then, because there's this rich storehouse of data, because the tax return's filled with data and all the rest, then we can make the rest of your financial life easy. So when it comes time for a loan, you know, getting a mortgage loan in the U.S., painful in a whole bunch of ways. You've got to fill out huge amounts of forms with all this information. You've got to get last few years' tax returns. If you run a small business, you've got to get your business P&L, all this other stuff. You've got a huge amount of work, and then the bank still doesn't really know you, and they don't know what they can trust. We think we can change how lending works so that lenders get vastly more rich data on you, so they can do a much, if you want, it's all your choice, and so they can do a much better job underwriting, so deserving borrowers get better loans at better rates for no work. It's done. That's what we're working on with small businesses, with consumers. Much better financial outcomes, more money, without having to think about it. Why should you have to think about this? Why should you ever have to think about bills? So those are some of the things. And then doing it globally. The same problems exist, country after country.
What trends or technologies, whether they apply to Intuit or not, are you most excited about? Right? So as a very sophisticated consumer, but a consumer like all of us nonetheless, what are you really excited about that's being worked on right now in the tech space? And you know, if you were going to start another company from scratch today, what kind of company would you start and why?
Boy, there's a lot of stuff that I just think we live in a golden age. There's so much great stuff that's being produced that you can build breakthroughs on. This whole services revolution. So instead of having to build all the code yourself, you can inherit services, whether you build them yourself, whether other people. Open source, GitHub, all the stuff that's available. Code, you can stand on the shoulders of giants now. The speed with which you can build stuff. The services out there with APIs that you can incorporate are just fabulous. But I think the seminal breakthrough of the last 15 years. 15 years ago, the Wall Street Journal did an article where they got 10 gurus to predict what tech will be like in 10 years. And they had predictions on the price of PCs and blah, blah, blah. There was one thing they missed entirely. And the good news, Wall Street Journal did a 10-year retrospective, and they said, great prediction on the obvious stuff. They totally missed. All the experts missed one thing. And that's this sharing economy, user contribution, these network effects around where people, you know, whether it's Wikipedia or Waze or eBay or Lyft or GitHub, Airbnb, where the contributions of others is what makes the value. We had a story. We have to answer a lot of questions in the tax business, for example. And two of our engineers said, we're trying to answer all those questions. Why don't we have our taxpayers, our customers, answer questions from other taxpayers? This idea encountered massive tissue rejection in San Diego, which is where we do TurboTax. All of our tax experts, and we have several hundred, said, oh, that's hogwash. You can't have bozos answering tax questions. You need to be a tax expert to answer tax questions. No one's going to trust us, ruin our brand. Fortunately, we have a freedom to experiment inside the company. So they were allowed to run the experiment. And I helped make sure, because this one encountered real tissue rejection, so I helped protect them as well. So did the GM of the division. But I have to say, I didn't think it was going to work. I didn't think you'd actually find taxpayers who would stop in the middle of doing something distasteful, like taxes, to help other people. Why would they want to extend doing this is like root canal extension? That's our whole job, is to eliminate the whole thing. Why would people, we haven't succeeded that way. I just didn't believe the supply of questions would be there. I didn't think it would work, but I was damned to protect them so they could run the experiment. And by God, it worked. People started answering questions from other taxpayers. Who would have thought? And the answers were not bad. And it kept growing and growing. And today we've centered on that. I mean, there's far more rich answers, far more cases that come from other taxpayers than from our experts. Plus, they write in plain English. Instead of taxies, we brought 3 of the super users who each answered over 10,000 tax questions. We brought 3 of them to a meeting of our top leaders, just for them to talk. Why? So this was part of what, to try to drive a culture change, so we would embrace more fully this concept of the sharing economy and user contribution. And I still remember one of the questions from the audience. You know, these are people, by the way, who come home from work and get on the computer and will work for 8 hours answering questions during tax season, doing research in federal IRS tax documents, ugliest stuff on the planet to read, to try to figure out how to answer the question. One of the questions from our executives to these 3 super users was, so why do you do this? Is it the points? Is it the leaderboard? One of the experts said to another one, yeah, points. I saw those points there. What are they for? And then they explained, no, we do it to help people. These are people who legitimately need help. They have a question, and I can answer it. I can help them. And then other people will read those answers, and it winds up helping thousands. This is truly an amazing time in world history, where whether it's Amazon reviews or Wikipedia articles or tax questions, thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people can find it rewarding and fulfilling to help millions of people for free. This is absolutely an amazing chapter in history, an amazing discovery. That's maybe a foundation of what's happening around us that I think is absolutely an earthquake.
So on that note, Scott, I think you helped a lot of people here tonight. I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to Cornerstone On Demand for, again, continuing to help make it more possible. And all jokes aside, Alex in the back is the person that's sponsoring these events. So Alex, a big thank you from Intuit for continuing to make it possible. And Scott, we have now officially had over probably 50 guests through this. It is undoubtable that you are one of the most successful people that has shared their time with us here today. What I think is more special is that in relation to how successful you are, you're just a really great guy. And I think it's clear to everybody here how much integrity you have, how much humbleness, how much thoughtfulness, and we really all thank you for coming and sharing tonight with us. Really, thank you so much.